after Jeremy Rubin had Garbled circuit pilled me, I Garbled circuit pilled the BitVM Alliance because I was so excited about it. And I said, hey man, this is the future. We have to do this now. And then everyone Garbled circuit pilled themselves, and then the entire BitVM Alliance pivoted into that direction.
Hi guys. Robin.
Hi.
Liam. I am so excited about this interview. I've been looking forward to it for quite some time. I don't know if you remember this, but our first interview ever, which was less than a year ago, was the first conversation that we ever had. That was pretty much the first time I ever met you. And I would say that our relationship has developed substantially since then. And I've gotten to know both of you much better over the past year, and kind of really gotten to dig into your work in a new way. So I'm excited to explore that.
I became a big fan of Bitcoin Rails.
Thank you. Yes. An original skeptic. You are now converted to Bitcoin Rails. Robin Linus, everyone. That is a public endorsement.
I was watching it in our hacker house.
Yeah. Really? You watched it at the Hacker House? The Peter Will episode, of course. I mean, who can miss the Peter Will episode? Well, thank you guys so much for being here. And
he wasn't quite up to date with the latest BitVM3 things, though. So I hope he's going to watch this episode.
I hope he watches this. I'll have to send this episode to Peter Willa. I did send our first episode to Peter Willa back in the day, but I'm not sure he watched the whole thing. Maybe just clips. But yeah, this will be... I was at the end of our last episode that Garbled circuit / what we're now calling BitVM3 had just popped onto the scene. I mean, this was like a new idea to the public when we did our last interview. And we'd actually said, we're going to have to do a follow-up. And now we're, maybe 8 or 9 months later, and quite a bit has happened since then. I don't think this interview would be the same even if we did it 3 months before. I mean, I think this is really kind of the perfect moment to kind of dig into the history of BitVM3. We now have actual history. We have an actual story of BitVM3 with multiple chapters to discuss. So excited to chat about that. But before we dive into BitVM3 and Garbled circuits, which, Liam, you're largely here because you were sort of a core architect of this particular scheme. You guys do have a long history. I mean, you were working on BitVM1 from pre-publication. How did you two meet?
I think Robin sent me a cryptographic scheme or something like that. We were talking on Telegram. It's the first time I remember interacting with you.
Oh, yeah.
And I was...
How did you even meet on Telegram? Was there a cryptography group that you both were in or something?
Wasn't it the hacking a ZKP verifier into Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, this guy, Sam Parker, set up this Telegram group for people to try and do a ZK verifier. I had been talking to him and this other guy, Aki, about trying to do something like that. And so, yeah, it was just a bunch of like-minded people trying to figure it out. And
so Sam Parker kind of introduced you. He's responsible for this bromance, arguably.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, shout out to Sam Parker. So you were in the hacking a ZK verifier into Bitcoin Telegram group, which you said was the highest signal possible Telegram group you've ever been in at the time. This was when, 2023, pre-BitVM.
Mm-hmm.
This was where BitVM was born, was in this Telegram group.
We created it in Miami at the Bitcoin conference in 23. Yeah.
And how long was this group?
On the Nostra Beach.
On the Nostra
Beach party, yeah.
Nostra Beach party, Bitcoin Miami 2023. Yeah. And then you were just sort of jamming about how to hack a ZKP verifier into Bitcoin on Telegram for some time before BitVM was born.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe each of your separate contributions? What did I imagine different people brought different things to the table, but how would you describe kind of what you each contribute to that discussion?
For myself, or
either way, yeah.
I have a background in SNARK research for a while, so I was at the pre this Telegram group. Even the first thing that Sam was trying to do with Aki was to find a proof system that's verifier fit in Bitcoin script. So we were trying that. It didn't work for anything of any like useful size. And there's also this kind of problem that you can't split up a script easily because you can't share data like without a covenant or something like that. And from my perspective, Robin's big insight was to kind of reframe the problem and relax what we were trying to do. We were trying to get like a real SNARK verifier in Bitcoin, and it didn't work. So instead, the BitVM kind of idea allowed you to share data amongst different scripts. But the relaxation was that it's not a verifier in a proper sense. It's like an optimistic verifier. So,
This was like one of the big ideas, right? It was the idea that you didn't need a full verification. You could just do an optimistic verification that kind of de facto solved your problem.
yeah, I would say that's the core. I mean, I guess if Robin disagrees, but that's like the core BitVM innovation is that you can do optimistic type protocols, in particular for SNARK verifiers on Bitcoin.
And maybe Lamport signatures also. You just sort of reference the ability to sort of connect scripts. That was, I think, also probably the major other key innovation, you would say?
That's the mechanism by which you do it. You sort of Lamport sign the same data in two different scripts, and if they are different, then you now have like a fraud proof, essentially, that whoever was supposed to be running the SNARK verifier didn't do it correctly, and then you can slash them. So that's...
How did you view Liam's contributions in all of this? Like, you are very publicly Liam's biggest fan. Like, how would you describe Liam's role in the development of sort of early BitVM?
I can contrast our skills.
Yeah,
like,
go for it.
What I mostly do is like crazy script hacks, like somehow making Bitcoin script do things that it's not supposed to do.
Yeah, fair.
Very much so.
But that is a weird skill. It's like some weird form of programming in weird ways. You don't have to be very smart to do that, I think. You just have to have lots of persistence of trying out everything.
And creativity, of course.
And maybe creativity.
Definitely, yeah.
But what Liam is doing is like he can do real cryptography. And doing real cryptography, you have to be very smart to do real cryptography.
He does the real math.
Many people can do some kind of cryptography. I do cryptography all the time. But then he looks at it and then it falls apart because he can point out that it's horribly broken and we should totally not use it. Mm-hmm. But he can do real cryptography that actually is solid.
Liam's in charge of the math.
Yeah. And
Fair enough.
That is extremely valuable. And I would even say he's one of the very few people in the Bitcoin space who have that level of skill in the cryptography world who actually work on Bitcoin. Most people in his skill level, they work on altcoins.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Oh, I guess there's sort of a history to all of this that I don't know who to properly credit, but probably Greg Maxwell or somebody on Bitcoin Talk was talking about using SNARKs, zero knowledge proofs, for privacy stuff. And then I'm not sure if it's Ellie or somebody
Ellie Benzazon?
Mm-hmm, sort of gave a kind of a famous talk about using SNARKs for scaling in the context of Bitcoin. And then there was the Zcash project, basically kind of made a production-ready private payments protocol that was originally it is a fork of Bitcoin, and there was discussion at the time of adding private payments to L1. But the SNARKs at the time that were necessary to make it work have a trusted setup. So there's like a trusted set of people that construct the it's called like a structured reference string, but basically like the proving key, like the information you need to construct a proof. And if these people are dishonest or they behave maliciously together, then they can forge proofs. So I think in part, or largely because of this, it was decided not to add Zcash functionality to Bitcoin. And
sounds like a non-starter in Bitcoin land.
Yeah, and I mean, private payments protocols have other downsides, like you no longer can audit the supply. There can be secret inflation bugs. things like that. And then I feel like at that point, most of the ZK energy moved to projects like Zcash and then later to rollups on Ethereum for scaling, because it was possible to use SNARKs on Ethereum, like because it has just smart contracts and general functionality. And it was not really possible to use them on Bitcoin. So I think people who are working on it, especially people coming from like a more academic background that wanted to work on SNARK, saw that this is where the energy was, and that's what they worked on. And yeah, I think, and then it kind of just snowballs over time, right? Like these things, they get this kind of gravitational pull of people to other people. But I mean, there is a history of zero knowledge proofs in Bitcoin. Like Blockstream has these confidential transactions on Liquid, and definitely lots of early Bitcoin people are very interested. But I think, yeah, it wasn't possible to use them on L1.
I'm curious. So after BitVM was published, I mean, you were kind of there. What was your like response and reaction when like the moment that BitVM dropped and the internet went on fire?
I don't know. I guess it's a bit embarrassing to say, but I was initially skeptical of the reframing of the problem. Like I want a SNARK verifier. I want a real SNARK verifier on Bitcoin.
For scaling
And for privacy. So I don't know if it's too in the weeds or we could talk about it later, but because of the optimistic properties of BitVM and the fact that you need cosigners to emulate covenants, using it for really strong privacy protocols becomes like challenging.
Clunky?
I think it's risky for the people who participate in the protocol. If you're an operator of a BitVM bridge for a privacy protocol, you take on more like liability yourself. Whereas if you have a smart contract on Ethereum, you don't. Or at least that seems to be what everybody thinks right now.
So you were initially skeptical when BitVM dropped.
Yeah.
Has that changed?
Yes.
Substantively?
Yeah. So my focus has always been on SNARKs, and the original BitVM construction, like the very, very first one, is sort of like a proof of concept. I don't know if Robin disagrees with that, but
fair.
And I think the direction that the work has gone over time has been good. It's moves away from the VM style construction where you verify arbitrary programs to just verifying that a SNARK is valid, which allows you to do more stuff, in particular these garbled circuits you can have, but because you have like one program that you're running instead of any program.
And a more narrow use case, right? I mean, this is really for the purpose of bridging. I mean, at this point, it is not useful for anything else. Like that is essentially what you are doing with this more narrow construction.
As far as I know, I think so, yes.
So BitVM 1 happens, you're skeptical. It's a much like kind of broader surface area of what you can, in theory, do with it. It's a sort of proof of concept thing. But then we kind of pretty quickly move into the land of BitVM 2. Is that when you joined Alpen Labs? Is that when, I mean, I wasn't there, but is that when sort of like companies started to get serious about actually using BitVM? Was when sort of the BitVM 2 concept came about? No, tell me.
Earlier.
It was earlier.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
It existed before BitVM was released.
But they obviously weren't using BitVM and weren't kind of like making their brand about it.
They first wanted to use BitVM 1.
They did want to use BitVM 1. Yeah. So companies were actually interested in using BitVM 1.
I think all of them, also Citrea, wanted to use BitVM 1.
Despite like the challenges with it?
Yeah.
It's clearly better than the existing alternatives at the time.
Which is a federated bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, it's like pros and cons. But so when these companies were, like, at what point did you join Alpen? Like, tell me about like your decision to join Alpen specifically, and why Alpen versus their competitors.
I think I joined Alpen very shortly after BitVM was published, maybe like a month or two later.
Shortly after BitVM 1 was published.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Were you already talking to them before BitVM even happened?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was at Blockstream at the time. I already knew Rubin before I knew Rubin. Why did I join Alpen? Well, it's a funny kind of sequence of conferences I happened to be at, and I just like kept running into Sims. So we spent a lot of time talking, and I thought that I still do. I think that like deploying these things is very compelling. Like I mostly focus on research, but I would really like to see a SNARK verifier on Bitcoin, and Alpen was a company interested in doing that.
Even before BitVM, they were researching that or thinking about trust minimization.
Yeah. I mean, they initially wanted to do, I guess, what you'd call like a sovereign rollup, or just inscribing data into Bitcoin and then having a multi-sig bridge, which personally I didn't find terribly interesting. But I thought that that it would be cool to like really work on something, and it seemed like a good niche because BitVM was very early and it needed a lot of research, but it also seemed like a lot of people were really interested in making it happen. So that's a nice combination.
And BitVM2, I mean, how quickly did BitVM2 kind of like come into the fold of all of this?
A couple months later?
Pretty quickly, right?
The first white paper came out in October 23. And then I think, around March, April or something, BitVM2 came out.
Okay, so when was it? Because the real topic of this talk is going to be BitVM3 and garbled circuits, as I referenced earlier. But I believe you had mentioned to me that the first time that you were really ideating on garbled circuits for BitVM was like well before our interview, well before, kind of like the public kind of caught wind of garbled circuits being truly usable in BitVM. At what point in this whole sort of history did you start ideating on this?
So I think there's a few points. Prior to BitVM in this Telegram group, there were, I guess Rubin also proposed something like this, but I wanted to use garbled circuits somehow because it seemed like a nice way to move computation off chain in like a two-party protocol. You have a garbler and an evaluator, and you can do what people call like conditional disclosure of secrets. So you can check something off chain, and if the thing is true or if it's not true, you leak a secret, which I think in the original context, it was some kind of lightning thing, like a conditional lightning payment or something like that. And then I stopped thinking about it, and then BitVM came out. And then while I was at Alpen, I was at this kind of research retreat thing with Xerox PARC, and they were focused on I/O, indistinguishability obfuscation, and functional encryption, and like these really fancy cryptography things that don't exist, or they're not practical. And during that, I started thinking about garbled circuits again in the context of these Bitcoin protocols, and it kind of. I mean, I sort of worked out like rough details of like what the Yao style scheme that people have now looks like. And at the time, I don't know, I wasn't sure of its practicality. So we didn't end up actually doing it at the time, kind of.
I want to ask you why, but before I do that, would you give like a little layman high-level TLDR on garbled circuits as sort of a verification scheme versus the previous sort of BitVM2 verification scheme?
Mm-hmm. So garbled circuits are a very old cryptographic technique. Well, they're from like the 80s, so I guess in certain terms that's old. But it was originally proposed in the context of multi-party computation. So the kind of classic problem for multi-party computation is we have money and we want to figure out who's richer, but we don't want to reveal how much money we have. So we can do this cryptographic protocol where I take the circuit for computing like greater than or something, and I garble it. So I create this like encrypted circuit. I give it to you, and then I use another protocol called oblivious transfer, but that's not part of the Bitcoin stuff. So you can then evaluate this circuit on one input. And so I put my money into the circuit, then I give you the ability to evaluate it on one input, and then you get a result, which is just like greater than or not greater than. And in the context of Bitcoin, the cool thing is that the evaluation procedure of the garbled circuit is totally off chain. It doesn't happen on chain at all. The only thing that happens on chain is I give you the ability to evaluate it on one input. Then you evaluate it, and you get at the end a secret if the predicate fails.
When you say like the evaluation results in this sort of greater than or less than, I mean, could that be sort of simplified into like a true false, yes, no? Like you're just sort of creating like a binary of like this works or it doesn't, essentially?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you could replace it with SNARK verification. So instead of checking if your money is greater than mine, you check that if this proof is valid. And then at the end, it'll say true or false.
So essentially, you're doing the verification for the proof off chain, and then you get this sort of true or false statement, again, that can be put on chain essentially as a fraud proof.
Yes.
Without actually having to put any of the verification data itself on chain, which you would previously had to do.
Yes. In the BitVM, the original BitVM style constructions, you used a protocol for like splitting a program into pieces and then identifying in which piece the prover lied. And then you run that part of the program on chain to show that they lied.
So this is sort of a key question. I mean, this is like the main benefit, I presume, of garbled circuits. Tell me if I'm wrong, but like, what is the efficiency advantage of this, and how would you describe like what the efficiency advantage of this versus BitVM2?
The on-chain costs are reduced by like 2 to 3 orders of magnitude. So you aren't putting any intermediate sort of commitments, like commitments to the state of the program on chain. And you also don't have to put this chunk of like Bitcoin script on chain.
Is there like, are there efficiency impacts on the off-chain costs? Like,
yes, very much so.
Okay.
So the original garbled circuits protocols had significantly higher off-chain costs.
Okay.
To garble a verifier for a proof, most people were focused on Glocks 16. Took like 50 gigabytes. Like the size of the garbled circuit that I sent to you is like 50 gigabytes. And one unfortunate property of garbled circuits is that each garbled circuit is only usable once. So like it's like kind of disposable. I give you the ability to verify a single proof. And so I need one for every proof.
Which is a lot of computation.
Yeah, it's a lot of computation and a lot of storage.
Right.
I mean, the way that the bridges require garbled circuits proportional to like either the number of operators or the number of watchtowers or the number of deposits. So 50 gigabytes, and then you have to make it maliciously secure. So you have to multiply it by like 7, and then you have like you multiply it by the number of operators and the number of watchtowers, and it quickly
explodes.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and
like
you need to verify them as well. Like you need to make them verifiable, and for that you have to send multiple garbled circuits, like the order of 7 or 10 or so. So it's not just 50 gigabytes, it's like 350 gigabytes for a single garbled circuit.
Was this sort of the reason why when you were initially looking into using garbled circuits for BitVM, you kind of like paused and were like, oh, maybe this like isn't going to work because the off-chain inefficiencies are such that, you know, maybe outweighs the efficiency advantages of data on chain?
Yeah, I think... So one of the big selling points of BitVM2 is that it allowed anybody to be a challenger. So anybody can post the fraud proof. If you wanted to use the Groth style circuit, this is still true. If you want to use the Yao style Groth circuits, and you want anybody to be able to be a challenger, then you need, 350 gigabytes times the number of operators times the number of deposits, which can be thousands, tens of thousands. And that just seems definitely not practical. So if you hold the we need to allow anybody to challenge thing as like a constant, as something you need to have, then garbled circuits until very recently didn't really make sense.
So what happened? Why does it make sense now? What's like next in this story? So you basically are like looking at this, you're like the off-chain computation is like too much. It doesn't really make sense. I presume you kind of put it to the side. And then what?
I think that...
I'll give you a hint. Did Jeremy Rubin do something? Like, what happened there? Like, something happened a few months later, maybe, and Delbrag happened, and then all of a sudden people are talking about garbled circuits. Like, explain that whole thing from my perspective. Maybe Robin, what happened?
Yeah, I was at MIT Bitcoin Expo, and I was sketching some bridge graphs with Ekram, and then Jeremy Rubin came, and he was just like, "Hey, have you heard about that garbled circuits thing?" And I was
And you
like,
were like, yeah.
"No."
No.
Like, well, first of all, I think he had posted it previously in the BitVM group, but I had just dismissed it because before that he had posted something like functional encryption, and that was just like not practical. And I thought he would do it again now.
So
with
he was
garbled
like
circuits.
backing up for a second. Like Jeremy Rubin was like in on the BitVM research. Like he was paying attention to the BitVM
definitely.
meta.
Of course, yeah.
Of course. Okay.
He was also part of that group that was hacking a ZKP verifier.
Jeremy Rubin was in hacking a ZKP verifier and all the greats. Super Testnet, Jeremy Rubin. Damn.
Even Andrew Polstra was in there.
Andrew Polstra was it? Okay. I didn't even realize the level. Okay. Now I have more respect for this Telegram chat. Okay. So Jeremy Rubin's like kind of just on his own, like parallel thinking this and sort of effectively is like, hey, have you looked at this garbled circuits thing? And you said no, even though that wasn't really true.
Well, like he asked me if I hadn't heard about that garbled circuits thing. And I was like, yeah, not quite sure. And then he explained it to me. And I actually had worked on garbled circuits before. I just didn't know that it was garbled circuits. Like I had worked on like, essentially like making lightning channels, like having arbitrary computational lightning channels. And for that, I had kind of like reinvented garbled circuits because it's pretty much a very simple scheme and it's easy to stumble on it. So I had already known what garbled circuits is, but I just didn't know the word garbled circuits.
I see. Okay.
And it hadn't occurred to me that you can use it for BitVM verification. Just, I don't know, it was just too early and I had forgotten about it when BitVM came out. And then Jeremy explained garbled circuits to me, and then it was like immediately obvious that this is the way to go. Like it took him less than 3 sentences to like completely rip apart BitVM2, for which we just had signed like a large contract for it getting audited.
For like a multi-$100,000 audit.
Yeah. Implementation was just finished and we had just signed the contract for getting it audited. And then Jeremy Rubin told me like 3 sentences and I was like, okay.
This is irrelevant now.
Yeah. You have to dig a grave for BitVM2 and forget about it.
Wait, so do you remember what were the 3 sentences? Like, what did he say to you that like got
He briefly explained to me what garbled circuits are, and then I immediately connected that it's the same thing that I had been using for this, like, doing complete lightning channels.
And you immediately put together that garbled circuits could do what Liam just explained, but you didn't have worries about the efficiency, off-chain stuff that Liam was describing.
Yeah. Well, in particular, the thing was, like, how to make it verifiable. Like, for SNARK verifier, you need a huge circuit. It's, like, on the order of, I don't know, 10 billion gates or something. And it's not just enough that I give you that circuit. I also have to prove to you that this is actually a correct SNARK verifier circuit.
Which means you have to give several. Like there has to be multiple
there are different
versions
ways. Like
of this.
At that point, I thought we have to do it in a ZK stack or something, and that seemed pretty impractical. But
why did you think you have to do it with a Stark?
It's kind of like the trivial solution when you work with stocks all the time.
I was thinking that was just like status quo. That was just status quo. Okay. Whereas using a SNARK, does that help with efficiency in some way?
The two approaches are you can either prove in a proof system that you generated the garbled circuit correctly. That's what Robin's talking about with the Starks. And this needs to be ZK, so you keep all the like secrets embedded into the circuit private. Or you can use a cut and choose style protocol, which is another really old cryptographic technique. Basically, I give you a bunch of circuits and then you check a subset of them. And then as long as all of those are valid, you accept. And if one of the remaining ones you haven't checked is valid, then the protocol works. So in order to cheat, you have to like get all the ones you don't pick to be invalid and all the ones you do pick to be valid. So the combinatorics lets you get really nice, like 100 bits of security from relatively feasible cut and choose parameters. The advantage of this is running the garbler in a prover is extremely slow. like 100 to 1,000 times slower than running the Garbler itself, which is already kind of slow.
You said the disadvantage is that it's slow.
Disadvantage.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. But so it does sound like you also had this concern, though, about...
Well, the funny thing is I had it later on. Like when I was at...
Like the initial
at the
idea
MIT,
was...
Bitcoin Expo, Jeremy had just convinced me about it. He just said, yeah, it's totally possible to do this verification thing. And he said it in such a convincing way that I just believed it at this moment, because I hadn't dug into it, and I thought, yeah, probably he dug into it and he knows. So I accepted it.
You didn't know about the problems yet, basically. You were just like, oh, this is...
I mean, I immediately thought that verifying these circuits is pretty important.
And that it would be weighty.
But I didn't expect it to be such a big problem as it turned out to be in like the very first iterations of us building a garbled circuit.
When did Delbrag come out? Just Jeremy wrote a paper
exactly
about
that.
this.
Like it was a week before MIT Bitcoin Expo.
Oh, he dropped the paper on this right before MIT Bitcoin Expo, and then he explained it to you, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Did he do continued research with this from that point forward, as far as you're aware? Or did you guys kind of pick up the pieces after Delbrag and kind of move forward with...
I don't remember if it was in the Delbrag paper, but he actually has a third method for malicious security, which is what we're talking about, like proving the garbling table is constructed correctly. His technique was kind of like a hybrid BitVM style technique where you basically prove in Bitcoin script that one of the gates in your garbled circuit is not garbled correctly. So this is like a nice kind of practical approach. But in my opinion, it failed. Like it undermines the efficiency claims of the garbled circuits, because you still have to put tens of, or I don't remember how big it is, but like a relatively large script on chain to do the fraud proof.
So you still had this sort of like crazy, like there was still this efficiency issue. The companies, though, Citrea, Alpen, right, all these different companies who are interested in this, they all also, I imagine, and saw for myself, kind of globbed onto this, wanted to like do research here.
Well, we had the BitVM Alliance already.
We had the BitVM Alliance.
We had been building the BitVM3 verifier together. And so we had that Telegram channel in there, and we had these weekly meetings. And like the next weekly meeting after Rubin had garbled circuit pilled me, I garbled circuit pilled the BitVM Alliance, because I was so excited about it. And I said, hey man, this is the future. We have to do this now. And then everyone garbled circuit pilled themselves, and then the entire BitVM Alliance pivoted into that direction.
All right, guys, I want to take a quick break to thank you for watching and remind you to click the follow button on my profile if you want more Bitcoin technical deep dives like this. I also want to give a shout out to my partners for making the show possible. My leading partner, Best in Slot, just released the programmability module for BRC20, making the execution of smart contracts possible for the protocol. I know that's been long awaited by the BRC20 community. Alongside this release, Best in Slot put out what is arguably the most sophisticated DEX for trading Bitcoin native assets called Coin Cooker, which I also highly recommend checking out if you want to dive into the BRC20 trading game and get started executing smart contracts on Bitcoin. I'd also like to thank Citrea, building one of the leading implementations of a BitVM style bridge for Bitcoin. Citrea is building what I think could become the canonical Bitcoin rollup, enabling programmability, scaling. Really anything is possible with a trust minimized bridge, which is the unique value prop of these BitVM style rollups on Bitcoin. Lastly, I'm thrilled to announce my newest partner, Spark, which is the leading state chains protocol on Bitcoin. State chains builds upon what was made possible by the Lightning Network for payments, but without the liquidity constraints and the UX challenges that often make self-custodial Lightning impractical. Spark is also led by one of the leading payments infrastructure teams on the planet, including founders from PayPal, Facebook. They're incredibly well positioned to turn Bitcoin into a true institutional standard for payment systems around the world, and I couldn't be more excited to support what they're up to. All right, on that note, let's get back to the show. So the BitVM Alliance, gets pilled into garbled circuits and starts immediately working on this. The efficiency issue is the problem to solve. And Alpen and you were with Alpen, and I believe you had come up with at least some initial iteration to solve this efficiency problem at Alpen, and created this sort of new scheme, which they called Glocks, which sort of separated from the BitVM Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about Glocks and sort of, how that all unfolded from this moment?
Sure. So, I think that, like I said before, there's this question or this advantage of BitVM2 with permissionless challenging. It became apparent that you can't actually have permissionless challenging for a bridge because of the light client problem. So, it was decided that permissioned challenging is acceptable because you couldn't really have permissionless challenging. Once permissioned challenging is acceptable, you can use different types of snarks. So the Glock construction used what's called the designated verifier snark. Normally, a snark, anybody can check it. A designated verifier snark, only one person can check it.
Like a pre-chosen
yes,
person.
A pre-chosen person. And this person, these snarks can be a lot simpler. Like they can have smaller verification circuits. So the Glock construction is a kind of Yao-style garbled circuit for a particular designated verifier snark that is like 100 megabytes or something. So it's smaller. It's like quite a bit smaller than the Groth circuit.
What was the efficiency advantage of Glocks over the previous implementation that the BitVM Alliance was working on?
The garbling tables are smaller. So
by like a factor of what?
I think 50 gigabytes to 200 or 100 megabytes is like
in
100x?
In terms of
200x?
like cost savings or sort of like practical implications of that, how would you describe those?
You don't have to store as much data in order to be a participant in the bridge.
Okay. By like some factor that would be
I think
particularly
200x.
meaningful?
Yeah, like 200 times less data.
Okay. So we're talking about like potentially that could theoretically morph into 200x efficiency and cost savings for bridge operators.
Yeah. At the time I was working on Glock, we were still focused on allowing anybody to be the evaluator. There was another development that I attribute to Ekram from Citrea, which is that you can use garbled circuits in a different way, where the number of circuits you need does not grow with the number of deposits that you have. I think, in my opinion, this is the key unlock that makes the Groth approach practical at all.
So basically, you can pour as much money as you want into the bridge without it, and it's like a fixed cost on the garbled circuit, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, once you accept permissioned challenging, you can use Ekram's trick with larger garbled circuits and still have everything be feasible.
Is Alpen still using Glocks as far as we're aware?
I believe Alpen is using a modification of the BitVM Alliance Groth implementation. So it's not using my designated verifier snark thing.
So that's a good offer. So
they're calling it Glock though. Like they reused the name.
They're keeping the brand.
Yeah,
they're maintaining the brand.
Yeah, the name is great, so they had to keep it.
They had to keep the name, but the scheme is functionally the same, if not incredibly similar to what the BitVM Alliance is.
They forked the code of the BitVM Alliance and modified it a bit. Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of, so when did you leave Alpen? You made this big move that many people were very surprised by. Alpen had previously gotten quite a bit of clout and credit in the industry and was considered sort of a leading company, I think, inarguably in large part to the fact that you were there and de facto you kind of, I think, got the support of Rubin towards Alpen Lab as a result of you being there. So there's some domino effects in terms of the social impact on Alpen's brand by your being there. I think a lot of people were very surprised when you left. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I liked working at Alpen. There were a lot of good people there. We did good research. And I think that I don't know. I'm somebody who enjoys research, and that I wanted to do less like go to market product stuff. And Yeah, that's just what I'm passionate about. And
did you feel like that's kind of like what you were like at a certain point you were working more on product stuff at Alpen and less on like the nerdy math stuff?
I always had quite a bit of freedom in what I worked on, but I felt like I really wanted to see these more like research heavy things be like at a certain point when you're making a rollup, you have to stop doing research and make a thing.
Yeah.
And the BitVM,
I hate it when that happens.
yeah, the BitVM research path had quite a few different like, oh no, we'll stop and do this now, and we'll stop and do this now, and I kind of wanted to keep doing that, like stop and do this now, because I didn't feel like the state of the garbling schemes was like
complete.
Yeah, I felt like there was more to do.
And they were like, we have a really good thing here, let's build it. And you wanted to kind of keep pushing forward on the research side. I mean, is that fair?
I think so. And I also just, I wanted to do my own thing. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and that it felt like a good time. Like, I really wanted to work like full focus on this garbled circuits, bridging stuff, and yeah, so.
Fair enough. So you left a handful of months ago, not that long ago.
I think in like November.
In November.
October.
I think that's right, because we discussed this at TabConf in October. And you two started a company together.
That's right.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, there's three of us, me, Rubin, and Yangtang is another cryptographer. And we have so far worked on a new garbling scheme called Argo. And we are also working on a bridge that uses Argo that advances the state of the art quite a bit.
Was this also sort of part of you said that you wanted to like push forward research when you left Alpen. The result of this was this new increasingly efficient garbling scheme then that sort of, in your opinion, perhaps outperformed the pre-existing Glocks implementation?
Yeah, no, it's definitely better than Glock, like the original Glock implementation. I think it's superior to the Groth Yao style garbled circuits. And yes, I started thinking about these kinds of ideas while I was at Alpen, but at the time it was very like, will it work? How can you research is always kind of like that. You never really know if what you're working on is possible or going to pan out. So yeah, I left Alpen and then I just focused really intensely on making the Argo scheme work with Yangtang, and we implemented it. And there were a bunch of different versions of it, but it's kind of I think it's all pretty much done now.
It's done. It is closed source, correct?
Yeah, we haven't published the full paper or the code yet.
What was the idea there? Like, why not? What's the business model? Like what is the vision for this company? And how does the garbled circuit scheme fit into the business model here?
Yeah, so the trouble of funding open source software is always the funding part. And we can't, I mean, I don't want to like sell restrictive licenses for software. I don't like think that's a good thing for the world. And so I guess there's sort of two parts. One is that Argo was like in active development for a very long time until pretty recently. So I didn't want people to use it if they weren't like aware of that, or sometimes people just like use stuff
that's not done and maybe dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. And then also we wanted to try and figure out a way to like raise money without selling equity to venture. Like we wanted to maintain independence of our company as much as possible.
This is something that we've talked about also in our previous episode. I mean, how much did you guys think about raising venture capital for this project? And, what were those conversations like? Or was it just an immediate no? Like, we're just not doing that?
I mean, you always give up like influence over the company, and we didn't want that. We thought since we do have a product that has so much demand, we can sell the product first and then see where it goes. And
We also didn't have like a long-term plan. So raising purely on the reputation of Robin and me and Ding Tong is probably possible, but I think would be on worse terms than if we had like a more cohesive vision for what we're going to do.
So what was the initial plan? I mean, you guys all were like, okay, we're going to try to make money with this. The plan was literally to just sell a closed source garbled circuit scheme?
No. I mean, there is a vision. The vision is to make Bitcoin better usable as a money, to make Bitcoin more scalable and more private.
It's very noble of you.
I mean, that's what we need. That's what Bitcoin is supposed to be. Bitcoin is supposed to be money. Many people don't believe that. Many people think it should be just a digital shiny rock, but this is stupid, of course. Like, it's supposed to be money and it should be used as money. And we had already previously been working together on shielded CSV, which is a privacy protocol, or both a scalability protocol and a privacy protocol. But that needs a bridge. You need to bridge Bitcoin into that protocol. And so the rough idea is that we build bridges. We build the best bridges in the entire market, sell it to people, and make money to build shielded CSV.
So the idea was, we want shielded CSV. We need our bridge for that. And we think we can make a better bridge than anyone else anyways. We'll just make our own perfect product for the ultimate product, which will be shielded CSV.
Yeah, you could argue it's a byproduct of building shielded CSV. Yeah. You're selling the byproduct of building shielded.
So that, I would argue, is the real long-term vision. Yeah. I mean, that's sort of what I'm getting from you, is the real long-term vision is shielded CSV, ZK coins. Maybe we can like actually TLDR that in a moment, or maybe we'll do an episode 3 on shielded CSV. But this idea that like you yourselves actually needed the best possible functioning bridge, and you believed that you could make the best possible functioning trust minimized bridge.
Yes, I thought prior to Argo, the state of bridges was probably not adequate for privacy protocols on Bitcoin. I mean, like, full disclosure, I guess, but like I think of that as like the ultimate goal. So like if we could activate a soft fork to get a SNARK verifier, I would wholeheartedly support that. We can discard all of this work and just do it the right way, you know, when everybody comes around to agreeing on what to do. But yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to make a private scalable.
In the interim, this is the long-term goal. The long-term goal is shielded CSV with this like ultimate badass BitVM bridge built by the creators of BitVM themselves. But in the interim, because you weren't raising money, there is this sort of like bootstrapping through selling the Garbled circuit, which again is closed source right now. How's that working?
It's okay. We sell kind of research services, I suppose. That's how I would describe it.
Okay.
So like the implementation is closed source, but I think also if you just found it, like most people would have a hard time using it or understanding it. So that was our pitch, and yeah, so we would help people use it basically.
So even if it were to open source, because I imagine that would be a criticism, right? Is like, why would I buy something that might be open source in 6 months? Mm-hmm. Even if it were to become open source, the idea here is that you are service providers who sort of support the integration of these technologies into, you know, whoever wants to use them. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say that's fair.
Okay, so
By the way, I wanted to add, building shielded CSV was the original vision of it all. Like I was only excited in Bitcoin bridges in the first place because I wanted to bridge to the ZK coins protocol, which is like the precursor of shielded CSV.
And it's interesting. I mean, I don't want to go too far down the shielded CSV rabbit hole because I think it deserves its own episode, and we should do a third. However, it's a little, I don't think people realize how much you care about privacy specifically. I mean, shielded CSV is a privacy protocol more than
privacy
a
and scalability. Like I always like to say, I'm in it for the money. I want Bitcoin to be usable as money. That's the only reason why I care about Bitcoin. I do not care about it being like a store of value or something. I guess that's a nice byproduct, but this is not what I'm in for. I want it to be used as money. And
meaning payments, because money means different things to different people.
Okay, then payments, yeah. electronic
I'm in it for the
cash.
payments. We
Peer-to-peer
need to edit your
electronic cash.
tagline.
Peer-to-peer electronic cash.
Peer-to-peer electronic cash.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I think Bitcoin is about, and that's what makes Bitcoin exciting to me. That's why I think it's worth my time in the first place.
All of this. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think I have a slightly broader perspective than Robin. I'm not exclusively focused on payments, but the way I see it is that Bitcoin is not capable of supporting the things that people want to do with it in a decentralized way.
Yeah.
And I think this is an existential threat to the project and the crypto industry generally. That by relying on centralized intermediaries to provide services like lending or payments or anything like that, you empower them, give them control over the protocol, and it will die. I mean, it's like a living thing, and I don't think people are worried enough about this, both in Bitcoin and in broader crypto. I mean, like one question I get a lot is like, why are you working on Bitcoin? Because like all the other SNARK people, right, are not working on Bitcoin, and I think this is a big part of my reason is I think it's important for everything. Like so goes Bitcoin, everything else will, right? If we get a law tomorrow because enough Bitcoin is in centralized intermediaries that you can only use it with a whitelist or something like that, and like the economic majority just goes along with it, like everything else will go away too.
Well, this was actually, Robin pointed this out to me. I think I mentioned this to you in our last interview. I was watching an interview with you on Bankless as prep for our interview. And I basically had this revelation that if we don't have self-custodial payments specifically, then Bitcoin is not permissionless. And I think that that's something that people really misunderstand, especially some of these sort of like loudest Bitcoin, ethos folks who, are kind of, they're hammering the drum about like, Bitcoin principles, but then, not really doing anything to support the payments use case. So yeah. Okay. Sidetracked. But that was a good one. I appreciated it. So all of this, basically, like all of this sort of garbled circuit service provision bootstrapping is hopefully ultimately getting to this long-term vision of creating shielded CSV or ZK coins protocol. Again, we will dive deeply into that in a future episode, hopefully. But yeah, your first client was, and I think, your primary client so far has been Babylon. Is that right?
We worked with Babylon.
You worked with Babylon. And Babylon put out a paper, or they, I guess, sort of published on a scheme that they called BABE, which I can't not laugh every time I hear that term.
It's Babylon in Berkeley.
Babylon and Berkeley? Is that what it stands for?
Yeah.
B-A-B?
I think so.
But you need an E, otherwise it's BAB. I guess. I guess they missed that.
B-A-B-E.
It's like the first two letters of the name.
Berkeley.
B-A-B-E. Babylon,
I'm
Berkeley. Okay, it's like Soho.
Them.
Okay, got it. Okay. Got it. Okay. Very clever, David J. So they put out this paper maybe like a month ago. And they were like, 1000x efficiency scheme, which was interesting because, we had spoken about your new scheme as also being exactly 1000x efficiency improvement. Now that I know, or once I learned that you guys had worked together, the obvious question was your work in this particular scheme referenced in that paper?
Yes, they do cite us. So we published our Argo in two pieces. The first piece, called Argo Mac, is on ePrint now. And as I understand it, Babe uses a protocol that is similar, but not exactly the same as Argo Mac. So the kind of key thing that Argo does, and that Babe also does, I believe, is to transform a representation of your proof in bits into a structured mathematical representation as a message authentication code, or MAC, over an elliptic curve point. So
which does what? Like TLDR? What's the function of that? Or
so the nice thing about elliptic curve MACs, or homomorphic MACs generally, is that you can perform certain operations on them for free. So when you're in a garbled circuit, you pay a cost for every operation you do. that increases the size of the garbling table and the complexity of garbling. There's a very old trick called free XOR, which is an improvement over the original YAO style protocol. The garbling scheme that the BitVM Alliance is using is a variant of free XOR YAO. It uses some other stuff, but it allows you to get XOR gates for free. So the motivating, intuition behind Argo is, can we get other operations for free by using max over different structures? And the snarks that we're verifying are very algebraic. They have a lot of structure. All of the sort of proof elements are elements of groups. You can add them together. So we want a MAC that respects the structure of the proof, the group elements. And by using homomorphic MACs over elliptic curve groups, you can do a lot of operations in the SNARK verifier for free. So you don't have to pay a cost to convert your pairing into a binary circuit. You can just do the pairing directly on the MACs. So that's what Argo MAC is. It takes a MAC of bits and converts it into a MAC of curve points.
Which reduces the cost associated with...
Immensely, yes.
Okay, which is the key thing. By you would say 1,000x. And that's off-chain costs or...
Both the time to garble and the size of the garbling table. So both of these, I would say, are off-chain costs, yeah.
Okay, so the off-chain, which was the key problem. Now we have officially solved the key problem.
Yes.
It's interesting because there were some criticisms, I won't mention, any names here, but some folks said, oh, this is just over the top. We don't need this level of efficiency. What we already had was workable and fine. Come on, Glocks, for instance, was, enough is all we needed. Do you have a point of view about that or a response to that?
Glocks is 50 gigabytes per table. Glocks nobody uses the Glock scheme. Glocks is currently the name for the YAO-style circuits that Alpen is using, and that is 50 gigabytes per table, which is extremely inefficient.
So you would say, so you would call their bluff. Anyone who's saying no, we don't need this extra level of efficiency. This is over the top.
People,
you would say, come on, no, actually, this is really important.
Well, you definitely cannot do permissionless verification with Glock, with Glock and in general.
Oh, this is a key difference. This is a different
circuits,
point.
Yeah, because there's that fundamental thing that if you do permissionless verification, then you need one circuit per deposit.
Okay, so
only if you do permission verification, then you have one circuit per watchtower operator pair.
Back up, because this is important, and I don't think that this was previous. I certainly didn't catch this before if you guys had mentioned it. So the previous versions of garbled circuits were permissioned,
yes.
But this new Argo MAC version is permissionless?
It can be, yes.
How?
Because it's so much smaller. I think of... one of the lessons of computer science is the quantity has a quality all its own kind of thing, that if you just keep making things better, eventually you can, you have computers that are so powerful, we just watch some TikTok videos on them or whatever. You started out with simulating nuclear bombs, and it's why would you need a computer that's 1 billion times better? You don't need a nuclear bomb that's 1 billion times larger to simulate or something.
Maybe you could make the argument with efficiency comes accessibility, maybe?
Yeah, you can do other things. You can just do more stuff. So you can do permissionless challenging with Argo. The tables are small enough and you can generate them fast enough that it is feasible to make enough tables for all the operators, for a large operator set, for a whole bridge in essentially negligible time.
And just for clarity, permissionless challenging specifically, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because...
we are conflating a few things here, though. There's, on the one hand, does the garbled circuit itself support permissionless verification or not? And there are different kinds, the YAO-style circuits, they do enable permissionless verification in general. However, you cannot really build permissionless bridges from them because they are so large that you cannot have that many garbled circuits as you would need for permissionless verification.
Right, so there's...
Then, the Glocks scheme, his scheme that he came up with, that is actually permissioned. It has a built-in permission verifier. You cannot use it for permissionless verification, even if you don't care about the space, the storage space. And then Argo improves over that it is permissionless. You can do permissionless verification, and it's also small enough that you can have plenty of these garbled circuits such that you can actually afford to store enough garbled circuits to do permissionless bridge verification. And Babe, in contrast, that is permissioned verification. Babe does not support permissionless verification. So it falls back to the permission regime.
Okay, so this also, I think, is just like an important conceptual thing for folks to understand about BitVM, that like permissionlessness like happens at different levels of the construction, right? And there's sort of
maybe it's important to explain what it actually means, that either like if it's permissioned, then you have a set of verifiers or challengers that you have to trust that one of them is honest. Otherwise, people can steal money from the bridge. If you have permissionless verification, then anyone can be a challenger. You can be a challenger. So if you see some shenanigans going on, you can challenge and you can ensure that nothing bad happens.
You don't have to delegate, basically.
And you don't have to trust anyone. As long as you trust that you yourself gonna challenge, then you don't have to trust anyone else. So it's significantly better from the security assumptions.
This is a perfect moment for me to talk about, because another component of the bridge design, I believe the bridge design specifically that we had talked about, is the fact that there is this Bitcoin light client dependency. You had brought this up before. This is something that you're also working on fixing, because essentially the Bitcoin light client creates a permissioned environment.
Yes.
That's an important thing, that we have on the one hand the engine, which is the BitVM verification, and for that we have permission and permissionless. And then on the other hand we have a light client, which is like another module that you need for bridges. And since we haven't had good permissionless light clients, people said, okay, we are fine with having permissioned engines with permissioned BitVM verification.
How many points of like permissioned sets are required along the entire construction of a BitVM bridge?
It's only these two modules, like the engine, like the verification engine and the light client.
Okay. So no?
Well, I mean, there's like fixed sets of people. There's like a fixed set of signers, which is in a sense permissioned. There's a fixed set of operators, which is permissioned. All bridges have that. Then if you have a Bitcoin light client, you have a permission set of watchtowers typically. And then if you have like a rollup, you might also have a permission set of sequencers.
So these are all areas that you kind of have to look at when you're sort of evaluating whether or not a particular bridge is quote unquote permissionless.
Yes. And the nice thing about a pure SNARK verifier bridge on L1 is you can actually make it completely permissionless. None of these people are involved at all. There's no signers, there's no operators, there's no watchtowers, there's not even necessarily a sequencer. It can be permissionless sequencer.
In this current iteration that you guys are creating right now?
No, that would be a soft fork.
Yeah, with a soft fork, right? A soft fork would enable this. Yes. However, you guys are doing your very best to get rid of every little permissioned point along the way. Yeah. And the reason I brought up the light client, of course, is because, you're working on something specific related to that. I don't know if you want to share. I don't know if you're ready to share. By the time this comes out, it'll already be done. So I think that you should just drop the alpha. How are you getting rid of the Bitcoin light client dependency? Let's just plop it out.
Yeah, I've been working on transaction introspection. It's related to covenants. It's essentially the problem that you would like to be able to read the transaction ideally in BitVM. So
you want when you're executing a transaction to be able to basically understand what's happening in the transaction as part of the
You would like to know that a specific transaction is actually in the chain and what structure that transaction has.
So maybe a better way of saying that would be being able to execute transactions that can read data from Bitcoin directly.
Right, that's like once you have that primitive that you know a transaction is in the chain and then you get a hash of that transaction, then you can use that to read data from the chain. It's essentially replacing the light client.
And this is not currently possible, but this is effectively what all of the Covenant soft forks are proposing, right? I mean, essentially, that is what we theoretically get from CTV or all of these other various Covenants opcodes proposals. Is that right? Is the ability to have introspective transactions?
Binohash is like a very weak form of Covenants.
We haven't defined Binohash yet, so hold that thought.
This form of transaction introspection that I've been working on is called Binohash. Binomial hash function.
just before we move on, though, like, is that accurate? Like, would you say that, like, essentially that is what all of these...
It's a very weak form. Like, you could do, like, optimistic covenants, essentially. Like,
people call it slashing
you're saying your hacky kind of workaround, which we're going to get into more detail here, is not as strong as, like, having CTV. Is that what you're getting at?
It's also a different thing. Like, CTV would not give us that functionality that we are using for this kind of permissionless bridges.
Which is
CTV would be in other ways helpful, but it's not solving this specific problem.
Okay, so this specific problem is trying to read data on-chain, essentially.
Yeah. It's the same thing they do with opcat in the opcat rollup. There's like a proof of concept opcat rollup, and it's the bino hash style rollup is sort of similar to that.
So opcat, and that's a good example. Maybe CTV is a bad example, but opcat would enable something similar to this.
Yeah, something superior to it. Yeah.
With no slashing. Like, it's just verified directly on L1.
Okay, so with this, with the ability to read data on-chain, you don't need the Bitcoin-like client dependency anymore, which would be awesome. You can just read the data straight on-chain. Everything's on-chain. Yay, we love that when that happens. How did you figure out how to hack transaction introspection into Bitcoin without a soft fork?
I think Liam started, like he pushed me down that rabbit hole at Bitcoin Research Week in New York. There was a mailing list thread by, I think, Ethan Hellman. He started it.
My bestie, I love him.
And he proposed that we might be able to, like, abuse ECDSA DER encoding to, like, learn something about the signature and then have essentially like a side channel to learn something about the transaction hash. And in that thread, people proposed several ideas, but none of them really worked. And in general, I like crazy script things, so I immediately got hooked. Like, I thought, okay, there might be something to it. Also, I had already been working on similar things. Like, Ethan actually cited one of my ideas that I had already in 2022 or something to, like, use DER encoding to, like, check some proof of work in signatures. It wasn't related to covenants yet, but it was kind of like the same sort of trick or the same angle. And so I immediately got his idea, and I thought how to improve it. And then we had a couple sessions at the Bitcoin Research Week in New York about trying to improve it. And at the end of the week, we had a scheme that was at least better than what was proposed on the mailing list, but it was still too weak to be usable in practice. And then I discarded it again, and then a few months later...
So this is a long story. This has been going on for months.
Years,
arguably.
When was Ethan's post? Was like at Bitcoin Plus. I remember Andrew gave a talk about it at Bitcoin Plus in 2024.
Wow.
25. I don't know. It was a while ago.
A minute.
Yeah.
Okay. But this, like, recently came back, like, fast and furious for you. Like, there's been recent developments.
I have no idea how I fell again in that rabbit hole. But
you were probably trying to get rid of the Bitcoin-like client dependency. You're like, gosh, it would really, like, suck if we had to just depend on this.
He had a big list of all of the, like, bugs in Bitcoin, and he wanted to put all of them into one thing. And he's like,
Actually, I just wanted to torture Peter Wallace such that he comes back and champions a soft fork for SNARK verification, so we can stop this madness finally.
If we do all these disgusting, gross script hacks, eventually they'll just give us a soft fork to stop us.
At Bitcoin Research Week, he already ripped it apart. Like, I had a first scheme that I thought could work, but like, then he told me about another quirk in Bitcoin that, like, we have not just 6 SIG hash flags, we have like 256 SIG hash flags. Many people don't know that, but for the nerds here, there's 256 SIG hash flags. It's very important. We only have 6 modes, but 256 different flags, which are non-standard, and you have to patch Bitcoin Core to get them mined.
Okay, so this is key, and P.S. we were definitely, like, calling back to non-standardness in, like, 1 second. Okay, so what was, like, the final straw that made this feasible? Because you have actually executed now a bino-hash transaction on testnet, soon to be mainnet.
Yeah.
Winky. Tell me about it. What was the unlock? Like,
it's really a crazy pile of hacks. Like it is, as
like
Liam
more than
said,
BitVM.
I really started with like a list of all the weird things in Bitcoin script that are there that should actually not be there. And it's like a very long list of things that are just like artifacts of like how Satoshi developed Bitcoin script. Like he had a very first version that was just like in the private form of Bitcoin script. The private form of Bitcoin before Bitcoin was actually launched. And then some people gave him feedback on the scripting language, and then he did an overhaul, and then he left some things in there because he thought they don't matter anymore. And it is a huge mess. Like,
what's like the most like weird, strange opcode that this uses?
It's not an opcode. The weirdest thing in there is a function called find and delete.
Okay.
And what find and delete does is it deletes, like,
it finds it and it deletes it.
Yeah. When you're verifying a signature, it finds that signature in the logging script and deletes it from the logging script, which is extremely weird because usually you don't have signatures in a logging script. Usually the signature is in the unlocking script. Yeah? You don't lock Bitcoins to a specific signature. You
so we
lock
don't
them
know why.
to public keys. So it's even weird that we have this functionality in the first place. And it is an artifact of like how Bitcoin script used to work back in the days before Bitcoin was actually launched, I think. And it is just still in there because Satoshi was too lazy to delete it, or I don't know what's the
find it and delete it.
Like
he didn't find it and delete it.
Like up until recently, people thought that it just has no use. Like it's just pointless code.
It's just a relic, basically. It's vestigial.
And then there are
the appendix.
Usually, actually, it's impossible to have a signature in the locking script because the signature commits to the spending transaction. So it's a hash cycle. You cannot actually have the signature in there, but you can. There's another weirdness to ECDSA signatures, which allows you to essentially put a signature into the locking script and then afterwards compute the public key that is correct for this specific transaction. Long story short, you can put a signature into the locking script. And then you can use find and delete to actually delete that signature from the locking script. And that changes the so-called sig hash. And there's... and
it makes it Covenants-esque. This is where we start to... Now it's like, I see where this
like
is going, because it's like, I see where this is going now. It's like, we're gonna either have a signature or not.
Yeah. Well, it's more like... I think I won't be able to explain it here on this podcast, but I can explain.
Do you need to practice and then come back on the show?
No. It won't be possible to explain it here without explain. Well, there are probably some nerds who actually want to hear all the details, but I feel like
we'll spare the rest of them.
Yeah, but one funny thing is like we put 120 of these signatures into the locking script, and then we use object multisig to verify a subset of them, and then object multisig deletes this specific subset from the locking script, and that creates a specific sig hash, essentially, from which we can learn something about the transaction. And that's essentially the key enabler of this scheme.
This is the key unlock. And this, okay, just to like call it back before we wrap up on the introspection transaction, this requires a fuck ton of non-standard transactions.
Yeah. And like fucking non-standard. There's like
extra non-standard.
Like there's non-standard. You can have like a config flag in your config file which says something like accept non-standard transaction or something, and that enables all kinds of non-standardness. But this kind of non-standardness that I'm using in this Bino hash thing is so non-standard that you cannot enable it with this config flag.
It's so non-standard that even Slipstream didn't want
it. It is evil. Like people don't want it. Like the entire hack also only works with legacy script, with like bear scripts, which people hate. Like I hope the core devs will hate Binohash so much that they finally get their shit together and enable a soft fork.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the best use for it. I actually don't want people to use it too much in practice because it's crazy.
I think this is all the key terms to piss off the core devs. I mean, you have non-standard transactions. You have what else? You have so many introspection.
Well, bear script, we have
bear script. I mean, let's fucking go.
Yeah, find and delete.
Yeah. And it's extra. I mean, I really like this idea of
potentially non-standard SIG hash flags.
Oof, people hate that. Yeah, I hate it when
there's
that
a bunch of non-standardness flags, and I think Binohash needs all of them to be deactivated.
So you're not bullish on this being used in practice, or are you thinking maybe this is going to spearhead the next wave of non-soft fork covenants research?
I mean, you can use it in practice. I think it can be made safe such that it actually works, and it's also practical. The script is 7-ish kilobytes, which is fine, I guess.
And it does create permissionless. It does fix one of the permissioned bullet points.
And the script is complicated, but the overall bridge design becomes much simpler in many ways. So it's worth the complexity, or it's worth putting the time into writing this script once and
the bridge becomes more simple because you can get rid of the late client, essentially.
Yeah, the bridge graph, we have always this graph of transactions, right. And this graph is simplified.
You don't need watchtowers anymore.
Yeah.
Then,
yep.
Which is
these watchtowers
pretty
make the
big
graph.
Deal.
Yep.
And they make the graph very complex.
Fair enough. Okay, so maybe our next episode we'll have to do a separate CSV episode. Maybe that'll be my excuse to have Jonas Nick on the show.
Yeah.
That would be a really good one. And then also perhaps we'll see what happens with the Binohash research over time. We'll see how this evolves. This is very early stage. I look forward to our first Binohash mainnet transaction coming soon, you guys. It'll probably be done by the time this episode comes out. And yeah, this has been a blast. I absolutely adore you guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.